39,000 pounds of pure cocaine, $362 million, all seized in one operation. But here's what
The FBI has added a senior leader of the Venezuelan gang, Trende Aragua.
What was supposed to be a simple purchase at a local auction suddenly turned into horror. Inside an abandoned storage unit in Texas, a man stumbled upon thousands of pills and bags filled with white powder. What lay in the darkness of that unit could have wiped out an entire town. And now police suspect the trail of a cartel that has been operating in the shadows for years. The special operation covered several locations across Texas, from warehouse districts in San Antonio to the suburbs of Houston, and expanded beyond the state, reaching into Southern California, where investigators say key nodes of the supply network were located. This corridor has long been considered one of the main routes through which fentanyl enters the central and southern United States. During synchronized raids in multiple cities, law enforcement stormed warehouses, private storage units, and shadow apartments, seizing 1.7 million counterfeit fentanyl pills and over 12 kilograms of powder, enough to produce tens of millions of potentially lethal doses. According to federal agents, this is one of the largest blows to a synthetic opioid distribution network in the region in recent years. When federal agents entered the first locations, many couldn't believe their eyes. Ordinary-looking rental units in quiet neighborhoods near schools, grocery stores, and auto shops had been completely converted into miniature laboratories. Inside were industrial scales, metal pill press molds, crates of unmarked blister packs, dozens of dead phones with no contacts, and several encrypted notebooks containing chemical formulas and cryptocurrency wallets. The entire operation began with what seemed like a minor tip. An anonymous report reached the office about suspicious activity around a storage site in San Antonio. Late-night deliveries, unusual tenant movement, and frequent short visits from cars with California plates. Initial checks revealed nothing concrete, but they triggered a months-long investigation that eventually expanded into a multi-state operation. Gradually, the FBI, DEA, and HSI joined the case, forming a joint interagency task force. They introduced wiretaps, surveillance of suspicious import declarations, and analysis of cryptocurrency transfers. Everything pointed to a well-organized network operating by the standards of modern chemical cartels. Shell companies forged import documents for laboratory reagents, couriers who regularly crossed the border, and crypto payments designed to be almost impossible to trace. The scheme was nearly flawless. Chemical components used to manufacture fentanyl arrived at California ports disguised as research materials. From there, shipments were redirected to shell company addresses in Houston and San Antonio. These cities housed the death warehouses, locations where powder was dried, mixed, pressed, and packaged into counterfeit pills designed to mimic popular prescription medications. Once ready, the product was distributed in small batches through a courier network disguised as typical delivery drivers. The investigation lasted more than 6 months. Agents gathered hundreds of hours of surveillance footage, dozens of intercepted call transcripts, and several controlled buys in which undercover purchasers received counterfeit pills labeled as medical brands. Meanwhile, analysts tracked the digital footprint. Crypto transactions split into hundreds of micropayments before being converted into fiat currency through shadow exchanges in Asia. The trigger for the tactical phase was a sudden spike in suspicious import declarations moving through the same California route. Containers with identical document numbers began appearing weekly. This coincided with an intercepted conversation in which one coordinator mentioned a big launch, a major production push ahead of the holiday season. And when one controlled buy revealed a record-high fentanyl concentration, the team made the decision to launch the raids. Simultaneously, in multiple cities across Texas and Southern California, tactical units secured warehouses, apartments, and commercial properties tied to the network. The result? 1.7 million counterfeit pills, 12 kilograms of fentanyl powder, industrial-scale pill press equipment, and documentation mapping the entire operation, from chemical imports to crypto laundering of profits. Investigators called the operation unique not only for its scale, but for how deeply the criminal network had embedded itself into ordinary residential areas. The death warehouses were operating in places where families walked their children to school every morning. That, agents say, is what makes this case one of the most disturbing in recent years. The network wasn't hiding in remote deserts or abandoned industrial zones, but in the very heart of everyday American life. The sheer volume of seized fentanyl shocked even veteran law enforcement officers. From the batch intercepted in Texas and California alone, traffickers could have produced tens of millions of lethal doses. The pills looked exactly like ordinary prescription medications, indistinguishable from real ones to patients and even pharmacists without laboratory analysis. 1 gram of fentanyl can kill up to 30 people. 10 grams, an entire school. A kilogram, an entire city. And this network was operating with dozens of kilograms of concentrate, ready for processing. According to investigators, the scheme functioned like a multi-level criminal corporation, with every stage isolated and disguised as a legitimate business. The first level consisted of chemical component suppliers. The raw materials arrived through Asia, labeled as laboratory reagents, packed into containers with forged certificates and documents that mimicked the linguistic and technical standards of real pharmaceutical shipments. The route passed through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, where containers blended into the flow of legitimate imports. The second level involved shell companies registered to front individuals in Texas. They posed as research labs, food production facilities, or logistics providers. These firms rented warehouses in residential neighborhoods near grocery stores and schools, places where no one would expect criminal activity. It was inside these peaceful buildings that the real work unfolded. Chemicals were mixed, powder purified, measured, and pressed into pills. The third level was the laboratories themselves. Inside the warehouses stood industrial mixers, hydraulic presses, and precision scales capable of measuring to 10,000ths of a gram. The lab workers, partly undocumented laborers, partly hired chemists, worked rotating 12 to 14-hour shifts. They were kept isolated, their phones confiscated, and many did not even know which state they were in. Some, according to agents, were smuggled across the border and kept in conditions that amounted to forced labor. This was not just drug trafficking. Elements of human trafficking were embedded directly into the production cycle. The fourth level was logistics and distribution. Finished pills were packed into containers branded as vitamins, dietary supplements, or cosmetics, and sent to regional couriers. Some shipments moved through regular postal services, using fake accounts and rented mailbox addresses. Others were transported by car, mainly pickups and minivans, to blend into ordinary traffic. Regional operators received the product in small batches of a few thousand pills and were responsible for supplying street-level dealers. The fifth level was financing and money laundering. The entire financial network operated on cryptocurrency. Payments were split into hundreds of microtransactions and moved through anonymous wallets, often created using stolen or falsified identities. Funds were then converted through shadow exchange pools and withdrawn into offshore jurisdictions. Part of the money went back to chemical suppliers, part to regional managers, and another portion funded weapons purchases, often through Mexico's illegal markets or stolen stock from U.S. storage facilities. An additional layer of the scheme involved technology smuggling. Among the seized documents were records of shipments containing microchips, lab analysis equipment, and components subject to export controls. Preliminary findings suggest the network used the same channels as their chemical imports to ship certain technological components abroad, possibly to foreign entities paying for protection or logistical services. The reason this scheme is considered one of the most dangerous in recent years comes down to several factors. First, the sheer scale of its lethal potential. Each batch could have wiped out entire cities. Second, the degree of concealment. The network of storage sites and laboratories operated directly within residential neighborhoods. Third, its international ties. Raw materials arrived from abroad, and distribution across U.S. regions was coordinated by groups linked to transnational criminal alliances. Federal officials say this infrastructure wasn't built for quick profit, but for the long-term domination of entire markets. And if not for the series of raids, several states could have faced a wave of overdoses unlike anything seen before. Investigators say modern drug cartels have moved to an entirely new level of concealment. They build legally flawless facades, renting warehouses in residential neighborhoods, registering shell companies as laboratories, storage services, or technology startups. Their strategy is simple: blend into the urban environment so thoroughly that no one suspects the innocuous sign out front is hiding a drug production site or a logistics hub. Once investigators understood the scale of the operation, the weeks-long preparation began. The FBI, DEA, HSI, and Texas local law enforcement created a unified command center where every step was coordinated, from monitoring courier routes
to analyzing import declarations.
Dozens of training exercises were conducted, multiple units were assembled, and a detailed assault map was prepared, showing all entry points, potential traps, and escape routes. Drone operators practiced scanning rooftops and surrounding blocks, while analysts alerted local dispatch centers to minimize chaos during the raids. The decision to act on this exact day was made after intelligence picked up two alarming signals at once. First, the imminent arrival of a new shipment of chemical precursors that could have doubled fentanyl production. Second, an intercepted message indicating that the network was preparing to move north, which suggested the closure of laboratories and escape plans for key organizers. At the same time, political pressure intensified. Several lawmakers demanded a forceful response, warning that the threat to Texas and neighboring states had already exceeded all acceptable limits. This urgency gave the operation its final momentum. When all units took their positions and the assault teams received the green light, only one step remained: to go inside. When investigators finished cataloging all the sites, the true scale of what they had uncovered became undeniable. This network posed a threat to several states at once. From properties in Texas and California, agents seized 1.7 million counterfeit fentanyl pills and over 12 kilograms of concentrated powder, enough to generate tens of millions of potentially lethal doses. Some batches contained double the average fatal concentration, effectively turning them into a crude weapon of mass destruction. Beyond the narcotics, agents found several handguns, automatic rifles with filed-off serial numbers, caches of ammunition, and even improvised suppressor components. Financial specialists worked on site. Safes held more than $600,000 in cash, with even more stored as seed phrases for cryptocurrency wallets and hardware devices containing digital assets.
In several storage units, agents discovered forged passports, driver's licenses, medical papers, and import certificates used to disguise the flow of logistics. Of particular interest were server stacks and encryption devices, laptops with wiped drives, radios with secure channels, IP masking modulators. On one compromised server, investigators found payment diagrams tied to foreign shadow banks and routes connected to Venezuelan and Central American syndicates. Among those found at the sites were couriers, technical coordinators, and at least 8 individuals being held against their will. Mostly laborers exploited as a cheap workforce for pressing pills. Some had been smuggled into the country and kept under control through threats and confiscated documents. The political response was immediate.
Officials in Texas and California announced plans for new legislation to increase penalties for fentanyl possession and expand the list of offenses classified as threats to public safety. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice declared the expansion of interstate task forces that will now target not only Asian suppliers, but also Venezuelan narcotic syndicates increasingly entering the fentanyl market.
For law enforcement, this operation marked a turning point in the fight against drug trafficking in the southern United States. They were hiding poison right in the middle of our neighborhoods. But this time, luck wasn't on their side, investigators said at a briefing. Agents emphasized that the scheme was particularly dangerous because of how invisible it was. It operated not in remote wastelands or underground tunnels, but in quiet neighborhoods filled with schools, playgrounds, and grocery stores. The system survived for so long thanks to strict segmentation. Every link, suppliers, mixers, pill press workers, couriers, financiers, operated in isolation with no knowledge of the others. This made infiltration extremely difficult and minimized information leaks. This wasn't a gang, it was a corporation with a multi-layered hierarchy, DEA officials said. The network was dismantled through a combination of classic investigative work and modern technology. Analysis of crypto transactions, digital intercepts, hidden cameras, and controlled buys. Only when all pieces of the puzzle aligned, shipment routes, financial channels, courier movement, were agents able to map the exact structure of the network and carry out simultaneous raids. HSI officials described the operation as a strike that severed the backbone of a sprawling fentanyl production network. According to them, similar raids had been conducted in the past, but none had ever spanned multiple states or revealed such deep ties between international suppliers and local distributors. Today, we proved that no hideout, even in the heart of a quiet residential block, is safe for those who traffic in death, FBI representatives concluded.